Olá, boa tarde a todos, a todas que nos acompanham aqui no Laboratório de Geografia Política. É um dia especialmente marcante, porque depois de 1 ano e meio é a primeira vez que eu volto ao meu escritório aqui no Departamento de Geografia da Universidade de São Paulo. E uma enorme satisfação estar aqui para manter essa série de webinários que nós estamos organizando já há algum tempo, discutindo vários aspectos das águas transfronteiriças. Nós temos hoje a felicidade de receber, com o apoio da FAPESP, Fundação de Amparo à Pesquisa do Estado de São Paulo, também no CNPq, Conselho Nacional de Desenvolvimento Científico e Tecnológico, a professora Edith Kauffer, que vai trabalhar conosco aqui um tema que é da maior relevância, a questão que envolve as águas transfronteiriças na América Central. E para isso nós vamos contar também com o apoio da já doutora Isabela Espíndola, que vai coordenar os trabalhos. Então, eu agradeço a presença, professora Edith, é um prazer tê-la conosco, e eu passo a Isabela, que vai coordenar as atividades. Muito obrigado pela presença e para quem está nos acompanhando também.
Obrigada, professor Wagner. Boa tarde a todos. Muito obrigada por vocês estarem aqui assistindo a esse 5º episódio da nossa série de webinar sobre governança hídrica transfronteiriça ao redor do mundo. E hoje nós recebemos a professora Edith Kauffer, como o professor Wagner comentou. A professora Edith, ela tem trabalhado com o tema da água desde 2003, aproximando dessas múltiplas dimensões que a água tem com relação à política. Então, desde política da água, água e fronteiras, águas transfronteiriças, conflito, cooperação, gênero, com água e poder. E a experiência dela foca na América Central, na questão do México e também no Mediterrâneo, e incluindo questões da África, da Europa, com refugiados e gênero. A professora Edith, ela é doutora em ciência política, com foco em relações internacionais, e é uma especialista em políticas ligadas aos recursos hídricos no México. Com relação aos seus focos na América Central, eles iniciaram sobretudo a partir de 2003, e a professora Edith, ela também tem trabalhado com a rede de pesquisadores de água entre as fronteiras de México, Guatemala e Belize, e também com a rede temática e o Conselho Nacional de Pesquisa e Ciência do México. Bom, eu vou realizar a apresentação da professora Edith em inglês também, e antes disso, eu gostaria de pedir que todos acompanhassem o evento pelas nossas redes sociais e compartilhassem também, seja pelo Instagram, pelo Facebook ou pelo Twitter. So, thank you, Professor Edith, for coming here. As I mentioned in Portuguese, I'll be doing a presentation in English. So Professor Edith has been working with the theme of water since 2003. And she has approached it from multiple political dimensions, from water policies, water and borders, transboundary watersheds, conflicts in cooperation, gender and water and power. Her experience has taken her to diverse terrains, mainly in Central America, Mexico, and the Mediterranean, but also in West Africa, South and North America, and Europe. She has a doctorate in political science with training in international relations, and she's a specialist in political issues related to water in the south of Mexico and Central America, where she has extensive experience since 2003. She has previously studied refugee movements from a political perspective, but since 2003, she has chaired this whole of water and its political dimensions. She has chaired a network of researchers on water on the Mexico-Guatemala-Belize border, as well as a thematic network of the National Council of Science and Technology, of whose academic technical committee she was responsible. She is currently the co-coordinator of the Working Group Strategic Resource Management, Environment and Society, of the Consortium for Cooperative Research on Regional Integration and Social Cohesion, as well as a member of the Scientific Committee of the Consortium. Professor Edith, the floor is yours, and the presentation, you can do your presentation. And thank you again for joining our webinar series. our webinar series.
Good morning. I am going to share my screen. First of all, I would like to thank you a lot for inviting me to share part of my research on transboundary water issues in Central America, and including the south of Mexico. I would like to start with a picture that I took from the Guatemalan side of the Usumacinta River, which is the most powerful river in Central America and in the south of Mexico. You can see a sort of door to the other side.
Professor Edith, just a second. You're not sharing your screen. We cannot see the presentation yet.
Okay. Sorry.
It's okay. Don't worry.
Could you see the presentation at the moment?
No, I think that you have to share your screen again.
Okay. Sorry. Could you see my screen?
Yes, now it's here.
And the presentation? Yes. Okay.
Yes, you just have to put it in the full mode presentation.
Okay. Is it okay?
Yes, it is. Now we can see it.
Okay, sorry. So as I was telling you that the picture is the Usumacinta River. We are on the Guatemalan side, and you can see on the other side the Mexican riverbank. So I would like to speak about, first of all, the complex relationship between waters and borders, then to give you some general characteristics on Central American transboundary river basins, what I call TRBs, then to present three main ideas for the presentation, and I would like to speak about a few fieldwork stories throughout Central America and the south of Mexico. First of all, what about waters and borders? You can see in the picture on the right, this is the Ostura River. The Ostura River is flowing from Guatemala to El Salvador, and it is flowing toward the transboundary lake of Guija, which is a transboundary lake shared by El Salvador and Guatemala. And the question is, where is the border? If you go to the left picture, you can see that on the bank there is a monument, but in the river and in the lake, the border, it is impossible to see where is the border. The relationship between borders and waters is a complex relationship, and as you can see on the figure, you may observe the international political border, but in the same territory there are also other boundaries, like for an example, indigenous territories in orange, or the watersheds or the limits of the river basin in blue, or other types of administrative boundaries like municipalities, among other types of boundaries. So I would like to propose you a simple perspective to consider the relation between international borders and waters. And the first situation that we are going to find in Central America and in the south of Mexico is the existence of international rivers, of fluvial border or river borders. So in this case, the question about where is the border, we can find that the majority of the international rivers in Central America and in the south of Mexico are defined following the talweg. The talweg is the deepest channel, but which is following an European tradition of the delineation of the border in international rivers. The majority of international rivers of Central America are defined following the talweg, but in some cases, just one case, in the case of the San Juan River between Costa Rica and Nicaragua, the river, the border is defined on by the river bank, which means that the San Juan River only belongs to Nicaragua. But in the majority of other cases, we see that the borders is defined by the talweg. In the case of the Dando River between Belize and Mexico, you can see the picture on the left, and you can see the river on the right, on the border. We have a disappearing border upstream when the level of the river during the dry season is so low that the river converts itself into a wetland, and so the talweg disappears, and so do the border between both countries. If we see the other picture for the Suchiate River between Mexico and Guatemala, in this case, after the floodings, the river moved, and so did the talweg, and so did the borders. And it is the same case in the Paz River between El Salvador and Guatemala, where a few years ago, the river moved 15 kilometers. And but in this case, the Treaty of Limits defined that the border was fixed on the old riverbed. So on the riverbank, on the right, you can see a monument that fixed the border in this case. Waters and borders in Central America also refers to transboundary water bodies like lakes and lagoons. And in the picture, we can also observe in the international lagoon between Guatemala on the left and Mexico on the right. You can see the land border with a monument, and on the lagoon, the fluvial border. that was an agreement really difficult to concrete between Mexico and Guatemala, and it puts about a century to try to establish this delimitation on the lagoon. Waters and borders also refer to transboundary streams and currents, to groundwaters and aquifers, and also to wetlands. And on this map, or you can observe an example of plenty of surface waters when we display all the hydrography layers in GIS along 30 kilometers borderlands between Mexico and Guatemala. We find also 6 transboundary river basins between Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize. One of these examples is the Guatemala River Basin. And on the picture, you can see a part of the major hydropower complex in Mexico, the waters of which are flowing from Guatemala to Mexico. And in Central America, we have a total of 24 transboundary river basins. On this map, you can see 10 of them. We worked with my teams in these 10 transboundary river basins. And on the left, in the picture, there is a Ixquichis hydropower project in Guatemala that you can see from the Mexican side on the background. So the first point of my presentation is that when we try to analyze waters and borders in Central America, we have to consider geography, we have to consider also politics, and also the history of relations between the countries, and mainly that is a history of relations about the borders. The second point is about TRBs in Central America and in the south of Mexico. It is important to mention that we need to include in the analysis the point of the shared geography of water policies and politics, but also to include in the analysis the existence of the legal pluralism, I mean from international law to local rules, and also the importance to include local stakeholders to understand what is happening in these transboundary river basins. And the third point is about the traditional scholarship on TRBs all over the world that focus on the idea that cooperation prevails in TRBs, and that there is an opposition between conflicts and cooperation, what our colleague Swatuk spoke about in one of the webinars as a binary perspective. In Central American TRBs, I would like to highlight that on one hand, the theoretical traditional perspective put on the table that conflict and cooperation are in opposition, and that states are the unique or the main actors in TRBs. What I found in my fieldwork in Central America is that conflicts and cooperation are deeply entangled, and that there is a multiplicity of interconnected actors at different scales that are in parallel, beyond, against, without, or among the states. So I was telling you that we have 24 TRBs in Central America, including the 6 that are located between Guatemala, Belize, and the south of Mexico. This is 8.4% of the 246 TRBs that we find all over the world. And it is something like 37% of continental Central America. As you see on the map, there is a big heterogeneity in size and in geographic configuration regarding these Central America TRBs. Central American TRBs are key for the region because in the cases of Guatemala, Belize, and El Salvador, more than 60% of the country are located in TRBs, and the capital cities of El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua are also located in TRBs, as well as the capital cities of the 3 states of Chiapas, Tabasco, and Quintana Roo in Mexico, among 4 bordering states. For Mexico, Central American TRBs are also really important because part of the water in these TRBs are flowing from Central America, and it is about 32% of the natural flow, and which represent 8.5% of the Mexican territory. But Central American TRBs not only share waters, we have a continuity of natural resources across borders beyond the political divisions among the 7 states of Central America and with Mexico. We also find a cultural continuum scarcely interrupted by the establishment of the political borders from the 19th century. And we find indigenous people and Afro-descendants on the Caribbean coast, and Central American TRBs also share poverty, marginality, and the lack of access to water and sanitation services, as you can see on the picture in the Pass River between El Salvador and Guatemala. So I would like to speak a little more about a few entangled realities in Central American and Mexican TRBs. The first of these examples is about the flouted and transgressed Guatemalan-Mexican border, which is a border of more than 900 kilometers. And it is about 56% of this border are rivers. I mean the Suchiate and Usumacinta rivers. And at local scale, stakeholders share waters. You can see on the picture the pipes that are crossing the border between both countries. These types of sharing water between Guatemalan and Mexican communities were called transboundary water paths for domestic use and human consumption in borderland between both countries. That was a bureaucratical notion invented by both governments. And because it is difficult to have dynamics of water cooperation between states due to the historical problem of the border between Guatemala and Mexico. So at local scale, we have a number of local water agreements, and Guatemalans give water and they receive light or the possibility to access health services or to cross the border to go to the main town in Mexico, or to use better roads to travel from one point to another point in Guatemala. They are using Mexican roads, so they cross the border. And there are strong differences of development and services and infrastructure between both sides of the border. So in this case, there was in 2007 a water conflict that was unresolved at local scale, and the water conflict went to the top, I mean to the Foreign Affairs Ministry of both countries. They opened a diplomatic negotiation on the topic, but they didn't reach an agreement, and the only agreement that was possible to reach was to realize an inventory on the transboundary water paths to cancel them from the 1st of January 2009. So this means that when local stakeholders are cooperating, states are not able to cooperate. And in this picture, you can see also another case of cooperation where people build a bridge on the water in the Santo Domingo River, and which was impossible to do by the states. The second example of these entangled realities of conflict and cooperation in Central American Cherokee is about the Lempa Cherokee, which is shared by three countries: El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. The Lempa Cherokee is part of more than 30 years of cooperation in transboundary issues. There are a treaty, the Triphenyl Treaty, which defined transboundary integrated water resources management, transboundary reserve, and a big amount of transboundary activities and projects in the region, which include the Lempa River, but also two other transboundary river basins, the Motagua and Ulua rivers. So in this context was opened the Cerro Blanco mine project in the Guatemalan part of the river basin, as you can see on the map, close to the river, to the Ostura River, which is flowing to the transboundary lake of Guija that is shared between Guatemala and El Salvador. So what we can observe in this situation is the trinational cooperation between states regarding Triphenyl. We see that there was a conflict of Cerro Blanco mine, which opposed the Guatemalan government and NGOs contestation, and also a problem of repression from the Guatemala governments against NGOs from El Salvador and Guatemala, and on the other side, a latent conflict between both governments and attempts of negotiation through Triphenyl to try to resolve the problem. In July 2013, the project was cancelled because of, not because of the conflict, not because of cooperation, but because of the presence of the geothermic activities. And further, in 2017, Bluestone about Cerro Blanco mine. So today we have a new actor in this process. In the same transboundary river basin, we have a small transboundary river basin located upstream between El Salvador and Honduras, which is the Sumpul River Basin. In this river basin, in 2011, a water conflict for a source between agriculture on the Salvadorian side and drinking water in Honduras, located upstream, arose. You have to understand that this is a highly conflictive border between both countries. And when we went to fieldwork, people from El Salvador told us that the Honduran had moved the border monument to claim their rights on water. In 2012, was created the Sumpul Binational River Basin Committee to try to resolve the conflict. And it is an interesting example because you have the context of international cooperation, and the water conflict converted itself into a transboundary cooperation on shared water at local scale. So the conflict was a point of mediation between two scales of cooperation on water issues. And in the same LEMPA TRB, we found also the case of the Ocotepeque-Citala aquifer, which was a cooperation between El Salvador and Honduras, which start on February 2019 with the signature of a letter of intention between both countries. It is important to mention that this is the most recently disputed border in Central America, the border between El Salvador and Honduras, and that in this context, the law, the territory, the Triphenyl region, and inside the Triphenyl region, the aquifer, are trying to establish a governance on integrated water resource management about the transboundary aquifer with the participation of local stakeholders that are really important. So from this experience of the transboundary river basin of LEMPA River, we have that it is possible to go from cooperation to cooperation in the case of Otak Aquifer, but also we can observe that we are going from cooperation to cooperation, but through conflict in the case of the Sumpul River, and we population in Central American transboundary river basins, depending on scales, depending on stakeholders, depending on the history of the border, and depending on the relation between the border and the water bodies. So we can go from conflict to cooperation, from conflict to conflict, from cooperation to deeper cooperation, from cooperation to unresolved conflict, and from conflict among cooperation and against cooperation, and from conflict to cooperation through conflict. And one of the most important element is also time. There are other examples in Central America, like the San Juan River, which registered an important cooperation until 1994, and at the moment where we find a number of transboundary disputes and problems in the San Juan River. On the other side, in the picture, you can also see the Suchiate River between Mexico and Guatemala, where both governments try to realize an agreement to extract aggregates to avoid floodings in the river, and also to avoid the fact that the river is moving, and also the border. And in this case, you can observe on the picture that the Guatemalan cacique sent his men with guns to avoid the realization of the extraction of the aggregates on the Mexican riverbank. So we can find that the cooperation yesterday in some transboundary river basin, like the Coatan River, the Suchiate River, or the Paz River, is in Central America, has today disappeared. But we have also new projects like the recent cooperation in on the river basin between Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize, which include also Honduras in the framework of the Mar Tuar project, which is going to be developed in the next years in Central America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Edith, for your talk, for all the interesting issues that you touched during your presentation. And before we jump into the questions, I would like Henrique to step up and do his amazing summary of her presentation in Portuguese. Henrique? Henrique, I think that you're muted.
Tá no...
Not yet.
Conseguem me ouvir agora?
Yes, we can.
Bom, então, boa tarde a quem está nos acompanhando. Obrigado, Isabela. Obrigado, professora Edith. Eu vou fazer, então, como a Isabela falou, um resumo rápido da apresentação da professora Edith em português. Bom, o tema principal, então, da apresentação da professora foram as complexas relações de águas que existem nas fronteiras das bacias transfronteiriças na América Central. E ela começou falando que essa complexidade começa logo no começo, no tema de como definir uma fronteira em corpos da água, né? Onde é a fronteira? Ela explicou que algumas fronteiras usam o conceito de towing, que seria utilizar o canal mais profundo, mas que isso tem alguns problemas, como, por exemplo, quando existem cheias ou secas, que acabam modificando isso ao longo do tempo. Qual é o canal mais profundo? Tem alguns que usam o conceito de linha média e alguns que usam as próprias margens dos rios. Então, e essa complexidade também, ela se expande não só para rios, mas como fluxos de água, para aquíferos e áreas úmidas. Então, ela fala também que existem 6 bacias transfronteiriças entre 3 países, por exemplo, México, Guatemala e Belize, para ilustrar um pouco da complexidade desse aspecto. E ela traz alguns pontos. O primeiro é sobre água e fronteiras, que é uma coisa muito influenciada pela geografia do local, pela política e também pelo histórico de relações entre os países envolvidos. O segundo ponto que ela traz é que as bacias transfronteiriças, elas podem ter uma geografia muito complexa, políticas hídricas que também influenciam nas relações, um pluralismo legal e também a participação dos agentes sociais presentes, sociais e econômicos presentes. Ela compara, por exemplo, uma tradição teórica que fala de que conflitos e cooperações são opostos e que traz o Estado como agentes, e que ela conta que na pesquisa dela, ela viu que na América Central, muitas vezes esses conflitos e relações, em vez de opostos, eles são muito interconectados, e também isso vale para os atores locais, que existem em diversas escalas nas regiões. Alguns bacias transfronteiriças na América Central também tem diferentes configurações, diferentes tamanhos. Ela cita, por exemplo, na Guatemala, Belize e El Salvador, que 60% do território está em bacias transfronteiriças, e também cidades importantes desses locais estão em bacias transfronteiriças, por exemplo, as capitais nacionais de El Salvador, de Honduras, de Nicarágua, algumas capitais estaduais mexicanas. E na América Central, e o que é dividido também, além dos recursos hídricos, tem muitos outros recursos além da água que são transfronteiriços. E isso inclui também não só recursos materiais, naturais, como também a presença de, por exemplo, povos tradicionais, ou então problemas sociais em comum dos países. E algumas realidades, então, na América Central são interconectadas. Ela traz o exemplo da Guatemala e do México, que tem uma fronteira de 900 quilômetros, sendo que 56% delas são formadas por rios. E isso, nessa fronteira, existem também, como ela disse antes, problemas históricos, que demandam também algumas coisas que têm a ver com a escala local de cooperação, alguns acordos que foram feitos muito específicos das regiões. Por exemplo, nesse exemplo da Guatemala e do México, de um acordo que tem sobre o uso de estruturas mexicanas dos guatemaltecos no lado mexicano, alguns conflitos não resolvidos, que são muito pautados em realidades locais, conflitos e cooperações meio complexos, como o caso da mina de Cerro Blanco, que coloca na equação agentes locais, ONGs, os governos. Ela também traz o exemplo de El Salvador e Honduras, do rio Sumpul, e que tem também conflitos para uso de água na agricultura, para consumo humano, que traz também, novamente, um conflito histórico na relação entre os dois países, e tem mediações em diferentes escalas. Tem também uma questão de um aquífero, que deixa as relações mais complexas, e que, então, essa cooperação está muito atrelada, tem vários tipos de cooperação, vários tipos de conflito na equação. Então, concluindo, esses conflitos e essas cooperações, elas são intrincadas e complexas por causa de muitos fatores, por exemplo, as escalas, os agentes locais envolvidos, as relações de fronteiras de cada lugar, a história da região, e também ela destaca o fator do tempo, quando ela dá, por exemplo, casos dos rios Coatão, Sutiche e Paz, que tinham cooperações que funcionavam e acabaram desaparecendo ao longo do tempo. Então, acho que os pontos centrais da fala da professora Edith foram mais ou menos por aí.
Thank you, Henrique, for a brilliant presentation and your capacity to summarize the presentation done by Professor Edith. And now we will jump to our questions. And Professor Edith, we have some that were already posted in our private chat, but I will read it. The first two questions. So the first one that we have is from Luis Paulo. And Luis Paulo is questioning what are the risks of the emergence of new conflicts related to changes in the characteristics of the borders rivers, whether due to floods, periods of drought, etc. And following Luis' question, we have another one from Julio Chiqueto that he wants to establish a relation with the question done by Luis in terms of the potential climate change impacts in the region and how it can increase erosion, floods, and other environmental hazards.
Thank you. How do the environmental changes can provoke conflicts in the regions? I'm going to take the case of the Dando River basin, where I was speaking about the disappearing border due to the low level of the water in the river. This isn't a problem between Mexico and Belize. And I think that this isn't a problem because the border between both countries isn't a problem. But if we go to the case of the Suchiate River Basin, where the border is moving because the talweg is moving, because the river is moving when the level of the water is high, and because of floods, in this case, the border has been historically a problem between both countries. So the moving of the border is highly a big problem between Mexico and Guatemala. And it is also a problem between a local population, because if I am a peasant and my land, which was in Mexico, today and tomorrow, it is located on the other side, in Guatemala, that means that I lost my land. So the problem depends on, first, on the relations between the states, on the history of the relation around the border, but also it depends on the local population. For an example, on the river basin upstream, there are forests. So the place where the border is disappearing has no population. So it will depend on the border, the relation between states, and also on the types of economical activities in the territory where these changes are occurring. So at the moment in Central America, we can observe important changes in regarding hurricanes and regarding floodings and also regarding drought. But I think that it will depend on these three elements, not only on the drastic changes.
Thank you, Professor Edith, for your comments. And we have two other questions. The first one is related to conflicts. So conflicts can occur between nation states, but they can also involve nation peoples. How to reconcile such disparate interests in defining the use of water in a transboundary basin? And following this question, and can any case from Central America illuminate this issue?
During the talk, I use the case of the border between Mexico and Guatemala, where local people are sharing waters without or against the states, and where the small conflict at local scale went bigger when the states tried to resolve it. So this is interesting because we can see that when people are able to share water, in many cases in Central America, states are not able to establish a cooperation on water sharing in the region. First of all, international law in Central America hasn't been taking into account for a cooperation on water and transboundary water issues in the region. And second, it has been difficult to try to establish cooperation based on a bilateral agreement between the majority of Central American states, and at local scale, it is interesting to see that populations, transboundary actors and local population are able to share waters, even when in some cases there are also conflicts. So how to reconcile, how to try to work together when in the majority of the cases, states are working on their side, and which isn't a good example of transboundary cooperation in water issues. And on the other side, local population are sharing waters, and also they are experimenting conflict, of course. I think that we need to include local stakeholders in not only in our analysis, but also when we are trying as a researcher to propose some elements for water policy and politics in the region, to try to give governments some insight towards cooperation on water issues in the region. It isn't easy in many cases when we try to put on the table the topic of transboundary waters in some countries of the region. The idea of cooperation is not considered as a good idea by the national governments. So it is something complicated, but the integration of the local realities and of local stakeholders in our analysis as researchers, and the integration into water policies is something really, really important to try to reconcile the states and the local transboundary realities.
I agree with what you said, Professor Kauffer, because this is something that we have been discussing a lot, not only in our group, but also in other research groups, how we can engage local stakeholders in political process related to transboundary water. So how they can be part of the decision-making process, and incorporating them into this management and governance activities is not easy, but it's something that has to be achieved in the near future. And Professor Edith, thank you again for your time, for all your knowledge that is shared with us today. And I want to remember to all that are following us that our webinar series will continue on October 27 with Professor Richard Meisner from the University of South Africa, and we will be discussing about Southern Africa transboundary waters. And please follow our webinar on YouTube and stay tuned for all of our updates in our social media. Thank you everyone for your time and for your presentation.